Today's topic is parables from the Upanishads. Parables, as we all know, are certain illustrations, tales, stories, which illustrate certain universal spiritual truths. You come across parables in most of the well-known religious teachings of the great prophets and saints and sages. So in a parable there are two aspects. One, the story part, the language, the imageries, and the characters that play their roles in the story or the parable. The illustrations and examples, all these are mostly taken from the socio-anthropological background of a prophet. For example, take the parables of Jesus, the sower of the seed, or the prodigal son. Any of these parables, if you take, the story part, the culture, are all related to the cultural, geographical setting, the place in which that prophet is born, Jesus was born. So in the Jataka tales, which are very extensive, related to Buddhist tradition, all these stories and parables are taken from the ancient Hindu or Indian cultural background, the language, the setting, everything. So parable is a tool or an instrument which brings home a great truth, a great philosophical and spiritual truth, which if put in straightforward language may not be easily intelligible. So the illustration brings home the message, the story behind the story of the parable. Now, Upanishads happen to be the oldest and the most ancient, and according to most thinkers in modern times, the most profound philosophical and metaphysical literature in the world. Most of the important Upanishads date back to 3000 millennium. That means almost at least 5,000 years old. So in those days, agrarian life had not yet become an established fact. Urbanization had not yet begun. So life was more or less confined to forest hermitages and huge townships which were mostly surrounded by forests. But small towns were non-existent. There were huge townships in which the kings or emperors resided. And they were all mostly surrounded by forest hermitages. And the great teachers of ancient India, the period of the Upanishads, lived in forest hermitages, but used to wander about and visit the kings and emperors, used to hold discussions, long, extensive discussions on philosophy and metaphysics. So in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, for example, of course there are many, but the most striking illustration is the long debate between a great sage, a saint who lived in a hermitage. His name was Yajnavalkya, and a great emperor who ruled more than India as we know today, because almost the entire Indian subcontinent plus Afghanistan, Samarkand, Azerbaijan, the empire extended over a much larger territory than what is known as India today. His name was Janaka. So you find long discussions. And sometimes there were great women saints like Gargi, the one who confronted the greatest philosopher of the times, Yajnavalkya, right in the court of King Janaka, and asked questions, challenges Yajnavalkya's scholarship and wisdom. So this was the intellectual climate, the spiritual climate, the intellectual landscape in which these Upanishadic parables had their origin. Sometimes these parables were not necessarily centered around life in the hermitages or the palaces of the emperors. Some of these parables are much more profound and deeper than straightforward intellectual discussions. I can give an example, and that is perhaps one of the most profound and one of the most celebrated parables in the Upanishadic literature. See, there was a great priest, a Brahmin priest, who was a great scholar and an extremely wealthy person of those days. So he used to perform very big Vedic rituals involving a number of scholars, discussions, and much more important, it involved a lot of philanthropy. This particular Vedic ritual which this old great Brahmin priest was performing was called Vajapeya, which is Vajasrava, Yaga, Sarvas. Now, in this Vedic sacrifice, he was supposed to give away a lot of gifts. Most of his property and wealth had to be given away among not necessarily poor people, but among people who had made a great name for spiritual wisdom and so on. But in this particular parable, which I am going to describe here, this man was a very tricky type of person. He wanted to get a great name. He wanted to establish a great reputation for his philanthropy. But he actually was not willing to give up anything. Now, in those days, cows, gold, and horses and elephants, these were the currencies which people used to use. There was no paper currency or any kind of currency. It was even before the barter system came into existence. You have to think of a time 6,000 years back. So, and the most important wealth of any person was cows or horses. And this man, being a rich man, had a lot of cows. So instead of giving away his good cows, that means cows which could yield a lot of milk, he was trying to give away all old cows which can't eat grass, which have become weak, physically fragile, which will be of no use to anyone who receives them, could be a big burden rather. So the Upanishad gives a long description. Pitodhaga, Jagdadrina, Dugdhadoka, Nirintriya. These are the 4 adjectives which the Upanishad uses in Sanskrit language, the ancient Sanskrit language, Vedic language, to explain the type of cows which this great so-called philanthropist was trying to give away. It means cows which have already drunk all the water that they could drive in their life. Means you can't even drink water anymore. And cannot eat grass anymore. With all their body and senses completely emaciated. Such cows, this man was trying to give away. So, but in fact, it was a great sacrilege and a blasphemy. But the man did not know about it in his arrogance or in his ignorance. He was trying to establish a great reputation as a man of philanthropy and charity, but without losing anything. He had a son. The son's name was Nachiketa. He was a little boy, maybe 5-6 years old. But this boy was of an entirely different type. He was very sincere, very honest, very earnest. So he knew, though he was small, he knew that his father was supposed to give away all that was precious to him. He had plenty of gold, horses, and good cows. Instead of giving away any of those, he was pretending to make a gift of all these useless old cows. So the boy could see through this game, and he wanted to help his father. He wanted to make his father open his eyes to the great sacrilege that he was performing. So he slowly approached the father and asked, "To whom are you going to give me? Whom are you going to make a gift of me? To whom?" This is the verse. Kasmai mam dasyasiti. This is a question. It's a long verse which I'm not going to repeat. The boy asked, "To whom are you going to make a gift of me?" Now, it's a very interesting, because it reveals a lot of the ancient culture and tradition. Very often, mythological stories and parables give a much more intimate picture of the social and cultural life of those times than history books. History books are lifeless. They are list of events which do not have a message. But mythology and tales and parables giving a very living and intimate picture of real social life of those times. The little boy approached his father and asked him, "To whom are you going to make a gift of me? Kasmai mam dasyasiti." The reason was this. The father was supposed to perform a great ritual, and the most important part of that ritual was an act of charity, which was technically called in Sanskrit sarvasodhanam, means giving up everything. So the father was supposed to make a gift of all his possessions. Instead of doing that, he was giving away all these useless cows. So the little boy wanted to bring a little wisdom into this man's head. Now, what is the most precious wealth of a father? His children. Children continue the lineage of the family, culture and tradition. And this man had only one child, a young son, 5-6-year-old, Nachiketa. So the most precious gift, the most precious wealth of a family householder is his son or daughter. And in this case, he had only one son. Money will go and come and may again vanish. But the lineage, the cultural and family tradition can be maintained only by the progeny, by the children. And this man had only one son. So, if you are supposed to make a gift of all your precious wealth, you have to give me away, because I am your son. So, to whom are you going to make a gift of me? The father may have thought this is a prank, childish prank. Try to dismiss him without taking seriously what the child was asking. But he repeated, Titiyam Tritiyam Sahovaja. That is what the Upanishad says. The boy repeated this question. Dvitiyam means twice, Tritiyam means thrice, 3 times. So when the little child found the father was not listening to him, he repeated the question 3 times. And the father got annoyed. See, when an old man is performing apparently a very big important ritual with a lot of concentration, or if somebody is doing puja, little child, a baby comes and makes pranks, suddenly, you may listen, you may ask the mother or father, please keep him away when the puja is going on. Like that, the father was performing a very big ritual. Of course, there was a lot of trick and deception involved. Instead of giving away good cows and good horses, he was giving away only old, useless cows which can't drink water, eat grass, or give milk. So when the boy repeated this question 3 times, the father became very angry and annoyed, and he answered, Mrityave tvam dadamiti. And the translation is, I am going to give you to the Lord of Death. That is very cruel. But he didn't mean that. He was annoyed when the little child went and may have perhaps scratched his head to draw his attention, we don't know. And the old man got annoyed. He said, I am trying to give you to the Lord of Death. In ancient times, in ancient India, it is a duty of every son or daughter to see that whatever his father or mother wishes should become a reality, should be fulfilled. Even the least bit of the wishes, the expectations of parents should be fulfilled. And every son or daughter was supposed to strive, work hard to see that the desires, the expectations of parents should not go in vain, they are fulfilled. And this boy, though he was little, he knew his duty. So he started his journey to the Lord of Death. That's how the story proceeds. Here, the story enters a new road, a new path. He left his home without his father's permission. Father may not have meant that I'm going to make a gift of you to the Lord of Death. But anyhow, he said that. So the son, the little child, left his home in search of the Lord of Death to reach his place. It's not a mythological story. It is one of the greatest and most profound parables in the Upanishadic literature. And it is from the Upanishad which Swami Vivekananda admired so much, Katha Upanishad, which is from the Yajurveda. So, this little child started his journey to the place where the Lord of Death was living. And he reached there. When he reached there, he was not there. He had gone out, some errands. The Lord of Death was absent in his home. The child reached the home, and maybe the family members of the Lord of Death, his name is Yama. Yama is the name of the Lord of Death in this story. Yama's family members may have requested him, please have your lunch, please have your food, you stay till Yama returns. But he did not either drink water or eat food. That's how the Upanishad says. The little child remained hungry and thirsty for 3 days and said, I shall not eat or drink till the Lord of Death returns home. And on the 3rd day, Yama returned home, Yama is the Lord of Death, that's his name. And he was upset to see a small boy who had come in search of him, remaining hungry and thirsty because he was away. So he felt sympathy and compassion. As a compensation for this, Yama asked the boy, okay, I'm sorry, you remained without food and water, you were hungry and thirsty all these 3 days. You can ask for 3 boons. Yama was a divine being in this parable. He could grant great boons to human beings. He was a supernatural, a celestial being. So he told Nachiketa, little boy, that's his name, well, I know you were hungry and thirsty all these 3 days, but as a compensation, I am ready to grant you 3 boons for each day of your waiting. And Nachiketa asked for 3 boons. These 3 boons represent 3 levels, 3 phases, 3 stages of human spiritual evolution. In a broader sense, these 3 boons represent 3 levels of human culture, human civilization, human aspirations. The first boon, it was this. So you have to remember the story. The Lord of Death, Yama, asked Nachiketa, little boy, who was waiting for him, in compensation for the 3 days that you were waiting in my absence, hungry and thirsty, I'm ready to grant 3 boons to you. You can ask anything you want. The first boon was this: when I go back to my home, my father should not beat me. My father should not be angry with me. My father should not scold me. He should speak to me in a very pleasant voice. Shanta sankalpa sumana yadhasyar veda manyur gautamo ma abhimurtyo tat prasishta ma abhivadet prasida edatrayanam prathamam varam prane. Prathama means first. Now look here, the little boy tells Yama, I am going to ask the first of my 3 boons. First boon is, when I go back to my home, my father should not scold me. Why did you leave me without my permission? Little boy of 5-6-year-old leaving the home in search of the Lord of Death. No father would tolerate it. So Nachiketa was a bit afraid, apprehensive that his father may scold him when he gets back to his home. So the first boon was, my father should not scold me. He should speak to me in a very happy, normal voice. And Yama was amused. This is like, a child, after all, the utmost gift that a little child may ask for is candy. That's all. Grown-up children may ask for cars or electronic gadgets. But in those days, the utmost gift that a child could have asked for was, my father should not scold me when I get back to my home, because I left my home without his permission. So you have to think of a family setting where children were supposed to obey their parents and parents were supposed to look after their children. That you have to keep in mind. So that boon was immediately granted. Yama didn't have any botheration. Now the second boon takes us a little further. Suppose we have everything in this world: comforts, bank balance, good home, cars, social security, insurance, everything. Suppose we have everything in this world: a good job, everything secured. What will you think about the rest of human existence? A person who has fulfilled all conceivable, imaginable desires and aspirations pertaining to the empirical life. All this. You don't have to work hard because you have got enough money and wealth. You don't have to worry about losing a job because you have got a secure job. And you don't have to worry about anything. Children are employed, they are well educated. You have no botheration, absolutely nothing. What will human beings do? It's a terrible bore, really, a terrible boredom. And then we start thinking of something transcendental. Not necessarily spiritual. We will think, well, what will happen to me after death? Because everything related to this world is fulfilled. As I said, a good job, home, cars, insurance, social security, bank balance, everything. Children well educated and good reputation, all. If human beings cannot think of anything beyond this, it leads to terrible boredom. And in fact, there have been cases, you read about these cases in some case studies, modern psychology. Problem of boredom. People commit suicide because they have nothing else to do. They are not poor, then they could have worked hard to make money. It's certainly a very positive state of affairs. If you don't have a job, there is something for that thing that we can work for, strive for. If children are not educated, parents can work hard to get them educated. If human life is completely devoid of any problem, and if we cannot think of anything transcendental, it is a kind of psychological harakiri. We have nothing else to do. It leads to some kind of terrible psychological boredom. It's a serious problem in modern times. Problems of abundance, that's what we call it. Problems of abundance. We are left behind that phase of human civilization where the problem was not of abundance, problem of poverty, of wants. Now the problems of abundance. Everything secure, nothing to work for, nothing to think about, nothing to worry about. So we are worrying about everything because we have nothing for us to worry about. That is called the problem of abundance. Now Nachiketa, though he was a small boy of 5-6 years old, he understood this perfectly well. So he asked for the second boon, which reflects the second phase, second stage of human aspiration, of human civilization. The Sanskrit verse is this: Sattum agnim surgam addeshu murtyu prabruhitam sadadhanaya mahyam surgaloka amrudatum bhajanti edadvitiyena vrine varena. This is the, most probably you'll find in the 14th verse of the Kathopanishad, first chapter. Now, Nachiketa is asking for the second boon. That is very important. He says, now look here, he's addressing Yama, the Lord of Death. Since I had your vision, you have chosen to bless me. I need not worry about anything. I know I will have a long life because Lord of Death decides when human life should come to an end. Since you are very pleased with me, I need not worry about cancer, heart problem, or any kind of physical diseases, because your vision automatically guarantees a long, secure, healthy, prosperous, happy, empirical, physical life. But only empirical and physical, nothing more. In this life, in this world. But what about the next life? So you please teach me that Vedic ritual, the ancient Vedic ritual, or that kind of meditation, the meditative technique, the spiritual practice, which will guarantee enjoyment in heaven, in afterlife.
I am sure because of your blessing, I will have happy life in this world. But what about next world? So I want that I should be able to enjoy the same level of happiness even after death. Surga. I heard that gods and goddesses living in the celestial regions, heaven, they live very happily and they live for a very long time. Much longer than human beings. I want that. So please guarantee that I will go to heaven after death. Now, most human aspirations end with this. Heaven is the ultimate that human beings can conceive of. From one angle, if you approach heaven as something transcendental, something trans-empirical, trans-phenomenal, unearthly, divine about it. But heaven has nothing spiritual about it. Because if you read the descriptions of heaven, you find it is more or less an extension of whatever you can enjoy in a 5-star hotel in this world. Only you don't have to pay for it. It is 5-star hotel, an apartment where you can stay for a very long time, very happily, in perfect joy and happiness without paying anything, without any obstacle, any hindrances. Now, after asking for the second boon, Nachiketa suddenly thought, well, heaven also doesn't guarantee any kind of permanent state of tranquility or contentment. Because after enjoying heavenly comforts, you have to come down to this world. Heaven in Vedantic tradition is nothing but a reward that you get for all the good deeds you have done in this world with desire. That's all. Heaven is nothing but a check that is drawn in our account for all the work you have done in this world, good deeds. So that guarantees, that ensures long period of stay in heaven, enjoying all comforts, which are not very different from the comforts that human beings can enjoy in this world. It's an extension. If you multiply earthly comforts by a few thousands, that is heaven. Now, Nachiketa understood this. Heaven also is not the last human aspiration. Now, the third boon Nachiketa is asking. He asks, I want to know the supreme truth, the supreme mystery of life and death. What exactly happens to human beings? As human beings, is human beings just body, mind, complex psychophysical mechanisms which comes to an end one day? Or is there something beyond, something continues to exist even after the body perishes away? Is there something that is left intact even after death? And if something remains, what is that? Are we just healthy, intelligent, prosperous, living beings, living maybe perhaps 90 or 100 years at the most, and then vanishes? Is death a full stop or is death a coma? That's the question. Yeyam prete vichikitsa manushe asti tyege na ayam asti dichege edad vidyam anusishtastoyaham varana mesha varastritiyakha. This is the third boon I am asking for. Some people say that after death, nothing is left. Body comes to an end, and after body comes to an end, there is nothing left. So in that sense, there is nothing transcendental, nothing trans-empirical. And according to some other great philosophers and spiritual teachers, there is something which remains even after the body is burned to ashes. And that is imperishable, that is transcendental, that is the Atman which is the residing deity, immanent principle, existing in all beings, which is also omnipresent, which is also transcendental, which is deathless, which is immortal. So these are the two views. One view is this: with body everything comes to an end. For people who hold this view, matter is the only thing that exists. Nothing beyond matter. And there are others who believe that there is something which is immortal, which is permanent, which remains intact even after the body vanishes. And this body is only a vehicle, an instrument for that Atman, the consciousness, to manifest. Please teach me the mystery of life and death. Now, if you can solve the mystery of death, then only you can get a peep into the mystery of life. Because life as we understand is nothing but existence in this psychophysical mechanism, maybe for 100 years. And there is nobody in this world who doesn't know that this body is not eternal. But still, all the conflicts, all the problems, all the worries, all the problems of the world are due to the momentary conviction that people delude themselves into. That is, body is immortal. So, though we know intellectually the body, matter, all the comforts we enjoy are not eternal, they are perishable, they have to vanish one day. Still, at the time of seeking physical comforts, for a moment, we delude ourselves, we hypnotize ourselves into thinking that body is eternal, matter is eternal, physical comforts are eternal. That's why we play false games. We go out of the way to acquire physical comforts. So, if we can, at least intellectually, get the conviction that bodily life is only a coma, and there is something beyond body, mind and intellect, which remains intact, which is immortal even after death, then we can solve the mystery of death. And when we solve the mystery of death, we also solve the mystery of life. Because life is, for an intelligent person, only a very intelligent preparation for a happy death, because happy death means going away from this world with a smile on the face, without any botheration. Because we know we have done only good things, and the journey will continue. So Nachiketa asked for this third boon. In answer to this third boon, Yama gives a long description of Atman, or consciousness, the supreme soul, the absolute reality, which is the only immortal, eternal truth in this world. And everything else is relative. It is not a negative presentation of the mystery of life. It is a very positive and promising presentation. Because once we realize, once we connect and link our mind and intellect, this psychophysical mechanism, to something which is eternal and imperishable, then we get a kind of spiritual elevation. We are not these tiny little cells in which our life is confined. We are something much beyond and bigger than this. We are the universal, eternal, imperishable, immortal Atman. Now, in answer to this, Yama gives a very graphic description of the journey of human life. The famous verse is this:
Atmanam radhinam vidhi, sariram radhamevacha, buddhintu saradhim vidhi, mana pragrahamevacha. Indriyani paranyahu vishayam steshu gocharan, atmendriya manoyuktam, bhoktetyahur manishinaha. I should explain, of course, just quoted the verse, that's all. Now, you think of human life as a journey in a chariot. Who is the owner of the chariot? The one who travels is Atman. And what is the body? The body is the chariot itself. And who is the rider? The one who drives the chariot is intellect. Now you need horses. Who are the horses? Senses are the horses. The 5 senses of perception like eyes, ears, etc. and the 5 senses of action. So the 5 senses of perception and the 5 senses of action are the horses. Mind is the reins by which we control the horses. And who controls the horses with the mind? Intellect. And who is the one riding in this? The Atman. Now, what happens? Suppose you are trying to reach your place and if your horses are not properly disciplined, not well trained, not tamed. What happens? And your mind also is unstable. You need very good reins, and the one who drives the horses should have his mind, his intellect in proper place. He should be proficient. He should be an expert rider. He should know how to use the reins properly to control the horses. And what about the external objects? They are the path through which the horses should be properly driven. So, the intellect, the driver of the chariot, should be a well-trained, balanced, intelligent person. And he should have the reins under proper control. The reins are the instruments by which the rider, the driver, controls, regulates the movement of the horses. And the horses should be properly trained. Otherwise, what happens? If the driver is not proficient and the reins not good, or the driver is asked to drive a pair of indisciplined horses, untamed horses, if any of these things happens, instead of reaching the destination, the horses will take us over a precipice. Death and disaster. Similarly, human life is like a journey. And the senses should be properly controlled, should be trained in such a way that they should be diverted in proper direction. For that, mind should be stable, the reins should be stable in the hands of the driver, the rider. The rider should have enough proficiency to make proper use of the reins to control the horses, and he should also be familiar with the path, with the road he is taking. Then we'll reach our destination. So Yama says, if we can have a stable mind, controlled senses, and a refined intellect, then life becomes a smooth journey and we can live in this world. At the same time, we can live without being worldly minded. We can lead a happy life in this world
without spiritual bankruptcy. See, Nachiketa's third boon is very illustrative. He wanted to know what lies beyond the present, beyond the visible, beyond the empirical. The transcendental reality can be realized only if the senses are properly controlled. Senses normally take the mind, drag the mind towards external objects. And then mind loses its control. Mind becomes rather a problem, a liability in the rider's hands. The rider, the buddhi, the intellect should have the proficiency to make proper use of the mind and then control the horses. And then life becomes a smooth journey, a spiritual journey. And then Nachiketa, Yama says, once we control the senses, make the mind stable, when the intellect is refined, and once we realize there is an Atman, supreme truth behind all this, then the realization comes to us. Yama says, that supreme reality, the supreme truth, Atman, it is present in the minutest of the minute and also in the grandest of the grand. At the end of this journey, we realize that we are something more than these psychophysical mechanisms. This Atman, the supreme truth, the imperishable, immortal reality, which is of the nature of knowledge, bliss, and existence absolute. And this is not only present in the smallest of the small, but is also present in the grandest of the grand. There's a famous verse in the same Upanishad. Say, Anohu aniyan mahato mahiyan atmasi jintohu nihidam guhayam tam akradu pasyati vidashokha dhadu prasadat mahimanam atmanaka. Meaning is very, very metaphysical. This truth, this Atman is present in the minutest of the minute. Means in the minutest of the minute particles or Atman, quark, anything you may call. It is the residing principle, the immanent principle, present in everything in this world. It is also the omnipresent or pervading reality. It is present in the grandest of the grand. When we control the senses with spiritual ideas and we regulate our life, we ultimately realize the supreme truth. This is the goal of human life. This is the goal of human existence. This is the way to transcendental truth. So you can find in this Upanishad, of course, Upanishadic literature, you have got scores of hundreds of parables. I have taken just one of the more well-known ones, of course. And you find in this story, after all, a parable is nothing but a tale that illustrates a universal spiritual transcendental truth. The story is taken part mythological, maybe part historical. And then the three boons are interpreted by the great commentators and great spiritual teachers like Acharya as three stages, three levels of human evolution. We should not stop with the present. We should not stop with today. We should look beyond the present, beyond the empirical, beyond today. And once we realize that today is only a passing phase in human evolution, this life is only a comma or a semicolon at the most, but not a full stop. Physical life, of course. And behind the psychophysical mechanism, there is the imperishable, immortal reality. This truth can be used by everyone in this world, in the workplace, in office, university, anywhere else. As Sri Ramakrishna says in the Gospel, these great spiritual truths should be kept somewhere in a corner. And then we must work in this world. that helps us to live in this world without worry and anxiety. Thank you. Namaskar.